Why the Alliance Never Took Back Lordaeron. That's the title of this video, and we all know that when it comes to Lordaeron, you put a video out there about it, Samiccus got to watch it, because this is some of the most interesting lore to me, always has been, always will be. I'm a big proponent of reconstructing Lordaeron. I want to see it rebuilt. Imagine it rebuilt in the same way Silvermoon was. Oh my god. Glorious it would be. Let's see what this video is all about here from Doran and why the Alliance has yet to take back Lordaeron.
So back in Warcraft 3, Lordaeron was caught off guard and fell. Previously the most important human kingdom, the creator of the Alliance of Lordaeron. However, after the Alliance recovered between Warcraft 3 and WoW Classic, how is it that the Alliance never launched a retaking expedition? Now that the Scourge was stopped, surely they could have just
hold on, we technically did. You remember that King Varian quest line where you go in with Varian? If you played on the Alliance, you did this. You went in with Varian into the Undercity, and you actually retook the Undercity, and only by your blessedness that we got ported out of there. We technically had retaken the Undercity at that point. And we had gone through, defeated a bunch of guards. It was actually one of the coolest quest lines I remember playing through when I was younger. It was a pretty badass quest line. And you end up seeing Sylvanas and Thrall in the end, and then Jaina ports us out to get us out of there so we don't end up fighting each other in the Undercity. But that was the last time I think that the Alliance has stepped foot in Lordaeron in terms of lore.
And rebuilt Lordaeron? Well, the answer is a lot more complex than it might appear. So much has changed, many of the players were unable to do something like this, so let's take a look at this scenario and let's examine whether Lordaeron could have been reclaimed to ultimately return back to the Alliance. Anything Warcraft related, Warhammer, Destiny, pretty much any game you can imagine, you can get.
Yeah, use the man's link. One thing real quick on that, I think, if I remember right, I think that quest line happened in Wrath of the Lich King. It was basically Varian was pissed off about the Blight plague thing that happened at the Wrathgate and how he lost so many soldiers there. So he went to take back the Undercity because that's where the freaking Blight was clearly made, right? He saw them as undead. He didn't know that they were a faction of undead that were kind of working on their own at that time. So he went and retook the Undercity, tried to figure out what the fuck was going on with all this Blight shit being made. It was a cool quest line.
Was originally built in Lordaeron, like how today the Alliance is focused on Stormwind. It was actually the...
That's right, we did step back in with Anduin too. That's right, what was that? Was that BFA? It was BFA, where we stepped back in with Anduin. That's true, I forgot about that. We march into the throne room, Sylvanas is sitting on there, and then she goes Banshee and fucking disappears. That's right.
Other way around back in the day. In the original Orcish invasion, it was really Stormwind that took the brunt of the assault as it came from there, and the Alliance was established to essentially protect the entire continent. However, how is it really that the main kingdom of this alliance fell? There was never really an organized movement to bring it back to the alliance, seeing how important it is. Lordaeron, together with the Yarati kingdom, is actually the most important kingdom for the humans. It is where they first arrived, when they split from being the Titan servants. The Troll Wars, some of the most important battles happened in this area, in this entire part of the continent. Well, the crazy turn of events happened that really did make it impossible to do anything, and I'd say the biggest reason Lordaeron fell so quickly is that it caught everyone completely off guard, and no one was actually prepared to fight a threat like this on the continent. You can see in Warcraft 3 how it started as just like rumors, something is going on, and just like a bit later, Arthas was purging an entire city. I mean, if Lordaeron sent an army, by the time they would have arrived, like, the Scourge already consumed the continent. Now, during the invasion, Lordaeron did get help, but the Alliance was not as strong as it was after the end of the Orcish Wars. First of all, Gilneas walled itself off, Stormwind was a lot weaker, and it was mainly just rebuilding from the Wars, and they had a lot of internal issues. So really...
Yeah, I mean, Stormwind was dealing with the whole freaking Van Cleef and all these stonemacers who wanted to get paid, didn't get paid, and we got Varian freaking his wife dying from the riots, Varian being captured at sea, turning into a gladiator, so you got a boy king. So while Stormwind was still around as like the final bastion of human kingdomness, it was absolutely fucking disarray. Oh, not to mention Onyxia was sitting there as a fucking dragon, corrupting shit, and nobody knew she was there, literally sitting to the left of Anduin, whispering in his ear and fucking telling him what to do and shit. So yeah, Stormwind was not a great place to be at that time either. So yeah, the human kingdoms had really fallen apart.
lot weaker, and it was mainly just
Bolvar
rebuilding
was
from the
there too, yep.
wars, and they had a lot of internal issues. So really, Lordaeron was kind of the main center of power. There's also a reason they decided to invade Lordaeron and not like Gilneas. Dalaran did help significantly, and even a contingent of dwarves arrived later, but the allies were having problems, like the gnomes dealing with Gnomeregan problem and a lot
Leper
of other
gnomes.
stuff. Now, the scourges had just spread like wildfire. They very quickly lost their kingdom. They fell into disarray. The scourge was expanding rapidly with the plague and constantly raising new undead. Very quickly, they managed to completely destroy the kingdom of Lotalas, which was also incredibly powerful.
This was huge.
However, we did deal with a lot of
I still love this freaking cut. This is a crazy ass cutscene. I thought this was really good. You got to understand what the Scourge did to the elves was absolutely insane. The amount of carnage and death. I think there's numbers out there like 90% of their population was lost that day. So I mean, Lordaeron fell, and Silvermoon by some miracle ended up making a comeback. But my God, the Scourge decimated everything it touched.
incredibly powerful. However, we did deal with a lot of this. Ultimately, Quotalas returned, that it was starting to be rebuilt. The Scourge was mainly concentrated in Northrend, like half the undead in this region became the Forsaken. Initially, there was a mission to bring back Lordaeron. This was in Warcraft 3. It was led by Grand Marshal Otmar Gerritos, and he did manage to actually do quite a bit. He was decently successful, but ultimately, he wasn't the right person to lead. He was very
Wasn't this guy super racist? Like, this guy was a piece of, like, he hated fucking elves. He hated everyone who wasn't human. I'm pretty sure it's this guy, if I remember right.
short-sighted. He was played by the Forsaken. He shunned his allies, and ultimately, it all failed. The question, though, is how is it that in this period between the end of Warcraft 3 and the defeat of Archimonde and Classic, that the Alliance never organized an expedition to bring back this major human kingdom? Well, the answer is very multifaceted. I'd say the main problem is that the Forsaken became way too powerful, way too quick, and it was also the Horde that protected. After breaking away from the Scourge and dealing with Gerritos, Sylvanas very quickly sought allies, as she knew she was just a sitting target for the Alliance expedition, and she ultimately joined the Horde together with later the...
Well, to be fair, I believe Sylvanas did seek the Alliance help first, and the Alliance shunned them away as like monsters. Like, oh my God, what the fuck are these? You guys are not human anymore. You're not anything anymore. You know, go die in a corner. And then they went and they were actually welcomed by the Horde.
Blood Elves, and then after that they became a significant regional power. At this point, it was already too late to do anything. The Alliance trying to bring back Lordaeron would essentially involve battling the entire Horde, and it would become like a global war. The other big problem was that a mission...
It's like, really, the Alliance had a Taiwan issue, right? They have a Taiwan issue with Lordaeron, where essentially they didn't, you know, take it back quick enough, and then you had other people ally with them. And so now taking it back was no longer just dealing with Taiwan or dealing with what was left of Lordaeron. Now you got to deal with the rest of the Horde. Now you got to deal with all the allies that fucking are helping Taiwan. Like, it's like the same shit. It honestly is. And it just became too big of an undertaking to really do it. And is it worth it? Are the resources that we need to, use to retake this city worth it? And we're going to have to rebuild it after we destroy it in this war. It just became like a sum-zero game. It just didn't make sense to do it anymore.
Big problem was that a mission like this just didn't make too much sense. Technically, as we can see recently, the Forsaken consider themselves Lordaeron. They're just undead citizens of Lordaeron. So if the Alliance retook it, what would they even do? I mean, the destruction of Lordaeron was terrible. While there were refugees, it's not like the entire population survived and they just were displaced. You can see in a portion that escaped to what later became Terramore, but it's not like half the population escaped and they were just waiting to return. The Alliance would have to essentially bring in settlers if they managed to clear out the area, and this new Lordaeron wouldn't really be Lordaeron, it would be something entirely different. The point is that Lordaeron was just far too gone at this point. It's not like Gilneas, it fell later down the line, and then essentially all the Gilneans found refuge with the Alliance and they returned like a decade later. The destruction of Lordaeron was far more severe. However, there were also further complications, like the Scarlet Crusade, which had this mission, like the exact same mission to retake Lordaeron, but it just went absolutely crazy. And also the Scourge presence, especially at this time, while the Lich King was alive, was a really...
Right, I mean, up until Wrath of the Lich King and defeating of the Lich King and everything, and even still now, the Scourge was an issue. Scourge were still roaming that, so even if you did retake Lordaeron, you'd have to deal with the fact that the Scourge invasions could still occur. So it just didn't make any sense for them to ever try to take it back.
big problem. The true answer to this question was that the Alliance at this point in Classic just had nowhere the amount of power they needed to do something like this. They had just managed to rebuild after the terrible Orcish wars, then the Gnomes lost their capital and lived in Ironforge. The Night Elves did join the Alliance, but they definitely wouldn't send a giant expedition to retake.
Yeah, I don't think they would have been about that.
So something like this fell to Stormwind really. I mean, they were really the only kingdom that would push this idea. So the time to retake was really right around when Gyarados fell and Sylvana just established herself in the Forsaken, and really the Alliance just missed this window. But regardless of missing the window, they never had the might at the time to do something like this. I mean, keep in mind, there is a massive distance between Stormwind and Lordaeron. Now, something like this that people expected would happen did actually happen in BFA when the Alliance was much more powerful. After the burning of Teldrassil, King Anduin did just this. He invaded Lordaeron with a massive force to remove the Horde and reclaim the land, but you can see how that ended.
Right, well, the Horde, yeah, they did eventually do this, but the Horde kind of forced their hand on this one because the Horde's attack on Darnassus was a direct attempt to claim that land. So then what did the Alliance do in return? The Night Elves were up there fighting for their land back, but the Alliance now saw, okay, the Horde are no longer just playing the neutral game at this point. They're trying to capture land from us and the resources. So what was the next, thing closest? Yeah, Lordaeron. That's the thing that's right there, sandwiched between Alliance territories, and they went and attacked it. And they won that battle, technically. When are the gnomes getting their homeland back? I've always said it, and I always talk about it. Leper gnomes are the next biggest threat in Azeroth compared to the Scourge. Why can't we get rid of the leper gnomes? What is up with these guys?
The Horde and reclaim the land, but you can see how that
big time threat.
Basically, I mean, the Alliance was actually quite successful here. I mean, they had essentially broken into the throne room, they cornered Sylvanas, but even if this wasn't the Jailer's doing and Sylvanas was being manipulated, still the reclamation of Lordaeron would have been much harder than just simply attacking the walls. As I said, the cities were destroyed, the Forsaken had already established themselves, and there wasn't much of Lordaeron to take. Furthermore, as the new Alliance is centered on Stormwind, their entire focus shifted. Lordaeron was something that they had considered, something nice to have, but it wasn't like the core territory of the Alliance. The primary interest of the Alliance was centered around the southeastern kingdoms and Kalimdor, and with this new alliance that was established, it was becoming less and less human-centered. It's also very important to keep in mind that during this time, the Lich King was still active, which is a really big deal, and he was significantly expanding the Scourge, planning to do to the rest of Azeroth what he did to Lordaeron. With this in mind, sending their entire army and then weakening it to fight the undead that also wanted to defeat the Lich King just didn't seem like a good idea. Like, the Argent Dawn came in here at this time to battle the Scourge, to retake a large part of the Plague Lands, but they remained mainly neutral. I mean, their goal was healing the land as opposed to being loyal to the Alliance.
And you're dealing with all kinds of issues, economic issues, problems internally, internal strife, all kinds of stuff going on. And while you have a massive army, it's already doing other things. So to spread yourself that thin to retake Lordaeron, basically preemptively attacking your enemy without a good game plan, and you're already resource starved, and the economy's already having issues, probably a bad idea. I'll just leave that there. You guys can take that how you may.
This was also a huge part of the entire situation. However, there
Real
was
life?
always tension. I mean, remember the battle for Undercity when Varian was pissed off after Bradgate and he literally just attacked Undercity? The Alliance always really had the goal of retaking Lordaeron in the back of their mind, but there was never a clear opportunity that just wouldn't cause a crazy all-out war. By the time the Lich King was defeated is when Garrosh came, and you remember what happened here. He significantly reinforced the Forsaken, they had attacked Gilneas, and at this point the entire part of the continent was a fortress. It would all lead into BFA. So do not spin around in circles. Initially there was a chance, but the Alliance just wasn't ready, and ultimately when they did have the capability to retake Lordaeron, the entire area became much stronger and they just couldn't keep up with this power. Ultimately, with the change in leadership and the new Forsaken identity and the lines between the undead Lordaeron and the Alliance started to blur.
Kalia's return was really the first time as an undead, right? Because she's undead technically. That was the first time I thought maybe Lordaeron could return.
And really at this point in time it just doesn't make sense anymore. Like, this mission is just a thing of the past. The Lordaeron of the past is gone.
I'm not gonna say it, but
Lordaeron
man,
exists, and I'm guessing that is going to be a huge focus of what we will see in Midnight as well. Thanks for watching. Check out this guy that destroyed Zelda's homeworld by clicking on the screen, and subscribe to my brand new Witcher lore channel by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.
Yeah, nice one from Doran. Yeah, definitely some interesting stuff going on here with Lordaeron. Some of its return to relevance. What could happen with it? I mean, we've already seen Blizzard rebuild a city in Silvermoon that's still a Horde city and still has Horde-only zones, but is now cross-faction because we know they're not going to put that much resource and time and dev power into rebuilding something that's only single-faction locked. So to me, I've said it a couple times now, okay, we have the blueprint. Now you can rebuild Lordaeron. Mikey, thank you for the sub, and fuck you too, man. Thank you for the sub, I appreciate that. Going forward, as I said, we have the blueprint now. You could rebuild Lordaeron the same way you did Silvermoon, make the upper part of Lordaeron cross-faction, and keep the Undercity as Horde only. Would love to see it happen. Could it happen? Will it happen? I don't know. But all the groundwork's been laid for it. Hopefully they do it. Nice video overall from Doran.